Good morning. Today we're going to talk about the basic warm-up calisthenics involved in the Hussar Sabre lineage. These are not strength conditioning exercises. Rather, they're designed to help get your joints mobile so you can go through the entire range of motion you'll need while fencing. These are old school exercises that will seem rather fuddy-duddy at first, but if you play with them over time, you will notice yourself loosening up considerably with them. They're designed to get very strong but stiff farmers able to go through all the ranges of motion, particularly of the upper body, that you need in order to perform saber cuts without effort or strain. So let's start in. So the first thing we're going to do is what we call knee circles. The knee comes up and the foot goes around in a circle. So why do we call it a knee circle? Basically because the knee is the pivot point for the entire operation of the foot turning. Do 20 in each direction or 10 if you find it difficult. Most of the movement in this exercise is actually coming from the movement of the greater trochanter in the hip. Because if you're doing this and your knee is going sideways, you are having a very bad day. So while the foot moves with the sole oriented towards the ground, all the action comes from here. If you find that you have a hard time maintaining your balance and you're doing all of this, put your mind into your supporting foot, because that's where the structure that's holding you up off the ground is coming from. This will refine your balance and greatly loosen the muscles in your lower abdomen and your lower back. The next movement we do is a sweeping motion, as if you're taking all the perfume right off your mom's dresser, and you're turning to as far as you comfortably go and then turning back. What's important to remember about this is that it is not necessarily a ballistic stretch. You are taking your spine and you're twisting to achieve the range of motion you're looking for. The palms stay down the entire time, and if you're really paying attention, you should be able to feel the bones in your lower leg twisting in order to assist with the motion. The next is one of the simplest things ever. Put your feet together and take your head towards each ear. This does not seem like much, but pay attention to how the contact your feet makes with the ground changes. You are taking a 12 to 15 pound bowling ball on the end of a 5 or 6 foot lever arm and taking it off center. If you're not going to fall down, that means everything between your head and your feet is changing shape. The more you can loosen all the rest of that up, the easier it gets to get that ear towards that shoulder. If you try to do that with your neck, you're going to have a bad day. You only got about 50 degrees of lateral flexion in your neck. So don't try to jam your ear from there while keeping all of this being a concrete block. Just notice all the side bending that you're doing, how your hands move up and down in space, how your weight shifts under your feet, and you'll get very, very loose and supple in no time flat. The next exercise we go through is what I like to call bad hula hoops, which is literally hip circles in a clockwise and then a counterclockwise direction. This can be done one of two different ways. First, let the head move so that the pelvis and the head act as a counterbalance to each other. The other option is to keep the head in the circle so that you have to engage in side bending and lateral flexion and extension. Beginners should start with this so that they don't accidentally turn this into an abdominals exercise. Try to keep your legs passive or as passive as possible while you're moving to maximize the amount of motion that goes on through here. When you're done with that, you can turn this into good hula hoops, which is a forward and backward motion in the pelvis. In this case, you should absolutely allow your head to travel a little bit forward and a little bit backwards so that you can really feel the pelvis-head counterbalance going on. The next exercise we'll do is called elbow circles. And just like the knee circles before, it's called that not because that's what's doing most of the movement, but that's because where the visual articulation is happening. We lock the arm into the waist, and we begin doing circles. It's very important to understand that the action that's going on here isn't happening inside the elbow. The elbow isn't capable of making these motions unless you're having a very, very bad day. All the action is happening up here in the shoulders. This will loosen up all the parts of your shoulders that are supposed to be loose while giving you the opportunity to begin noticing what the shoulder blade does as you move your arm around through space. This is a very, very important exercise for getting the suppleness through the shoulder you'll need in order to fence effectively. Following the elbow circles, we do wrist circles. The elbow stays locked into the body just to make sure we're not doing any extraneous motion. And we do circles. with the wrist. The fist is held compactly, but not tight. We're not doing forearm strength conditioning here, but instead attempting to determine to what extent you can make a full circle with your wrist. Most beginners will do something like this and say, I'm totally making a circle, like your 3-year-olds with a crayon on the refrigerator door. Try to, if this was an old school clock, hit every single number on the clock face while you do your wrist circles. Do them quickly so that you can't be tensed up, and do them in both directions. 10 to 20 times is a good number. One of the ones that I've added to the system, because I've noticed that we tend to need it badly because we tend to be so computer oriented, is what I call ducks flying backwards. In this motion, we're going to take our arms and we're going to do shoulder circles. When we get to the backwards part, we're going to open up through the chest, so the chest goes into extension. When we go forwards, the chest flexes. So the entire torso learns that it can actually change shape. Do this a few times. Notice all the places where you're tight that you didn't realize you were tight. And then when you're done with that, you can do ducks flying forwards. Many people will find one of these two to be very difficult and the other one to be their just go-to motion. So when you do this, if you have a much easier time with the flying backwards or flying forwards, that is absolutely normal and to be expected. The point is that you want to liberate not just the shoulder girdle, but also your chest, because that's where many of the refined motions you'll need to do when fencing come from. The arm is connected to the rest of your skeleton only through the collarbone and your sternum. Everything else is a muscular connection. So you need to be able to change the shape of everything in your body. The last basic warm-up exercise we have is one that I call fish. The elbows are together, the wrists are together, and the palms are together, and you go from side to side. If you are particularly flexible through the back, you can allow your hands to come forward and go side to side. That will show you any particular tight places you happen to have in the upper arm. It's important, however, not to do this and to force it, because if you do that, you're beginning to crank on the wrist bones there, and giving yourself carpal tunnel syndrome is a lousy way to start your day. There's no set amount of time to do that. Just do it for a little bit until you can actually feel yourself loosening up. The energy here, as I make this motion, is obviously not coming from my fingertips as we slide past each other, right? If you are paying close attention, you'll eventually feel the force for this to happen coming all the way out of the hips and occasionally even out of your feet. So pay attention to how your whole body contributes to movements, even if visually they're very small and isolated. That'll be very important for those of you who want to be able to individuate moulinets from the elbow, the wrist, and the shoulder, all of which involve whole body movement expressed visually at a very specific point in the arm. Let's look at the basic cut warm-ups in place rather than stepping. From our guard stance, making sure to keep the hand on the sagittal plane in front of the sternum in order to protect the abdominal aorta, we'll begin making cuts 1 through 4. We're going to make them large rather than tight the way we might while actually fencing with a partner. The purpose of that is to slowly open up the shoulder girdle and gain suppleness to the shoulder. If you are a beginner, you need to pay particular attention to this. Almost every person I have ever taught has claimed to have a supple shoulder and has had no idea what that actually means. So make these cuts big until you can make them fluid, then make them smaller. Vidyas or en garde, cuts 1, 2, 3, 4. They come in at roughly a 45. They can flow smoothly into the next cuts. 1, 2, 3, 4. Then we turn and we begin making lateral cuts as if you are beheading your invisible doppelganger. Unlike some other systems, we separate the lateral cuts from the diagonal cuts in our warm-up. So we make 10 of these in each direction, and we'll do reverse lateral cuts as well. Then we change hands and change our guard stance. 1, 2, 3, 4. Almost all of the Austro-Hungarian lineages that we possess emphasize how important it is to be able to fence with either hand. So this is something you need to pay careful attention to. The power comes from the waist. Articulation happens wherever you need it to happen, shoulder, elbow, or wrist. But at the end of the day, since power comes from your waist can transmit power to your left arm just as easily as it can your right. Lateral cuts again. I have a complex fracture in my left wrist, so my lateral cuts look a little bit goofy here. I have to open my hand slightly. You should maintain a fist grip the entire time. Backhand lateral cuts. It's important not to do this, but to stay tall. We change hands, we change our guard stance again, and we perform thrusts. The thrusts are performed with the palms supinated, that is up. They go out and back. Unlike most other actions in the system, the thrusts are actually just a straight up shoulder pump because the goal is to make contact and get that blade back as rapidly as possible. If I make a thrust and lean on it and we have multiple opponents, what I've just done is present a forearm barbecue for any opponents who are hanging out. We don't want that. You make your thrust and you get back. And if you're doing it on horseback, it's especially effective because you'll penetrate all the way into the hay bale or whatever it is you're trying to stab, and you'll lose your weapon. Doing that in the middle of a giant fracas would be a very bad idea, obviously. So to sum up, cuts 1 through 4, cuts 1 through 4 with either hand, lateral cuts with either hand, and thrusts. Happy fencing. We've got more videos and content coming, so if you liked what you saw and it was useful for you, please stab the like button, /subscribe, and punch the little bell icon so that you're notified immediately when new content comes available. Thanks, and go do the thing.